What should I say about Aurora? Should I tell you how talented she is? Or should I tell you how gorgeous she is? Or maybe I should tell you how she made me want to be a better man just by being at my side. But I don't know what I should do these days to make her happy. To see that radiant smile that is so mesmerizing that I just want her to keep doing it, or to get a reaction from her. How can she be so heartless to do this to me? My love for her knows no bounds, and it breaks my heart to see her like this. I met Aurora when I was 10, and she was 7. The moment I saw her, she seemed so adorable that the urge to protect her awoke on its own. She was the daughter of my mom's client, and since her mom was also a single mother like mine, she would often bring her to my mom's salon. That day was the first time in a while that I visited my mother's workplace, but surely it wasn't the last. After that, I would always insist on going there just so I could see her, and after a few visits, the two of us ended up becoming friends. I learned that she had a pretty unique taste, such as her favorite color, even at the age was rust, and where she disliked stuffed toys and dolls, she loved playing board games. The more I learned about her, the strong pull she had on me, and for some reason, loved wondering about her. When she told me the name of her school, I persisted that my parents transfer me there, and when they denied, I threw a fit for hours until they finally gave in. I followed her from there to the college, and one day, I was finally able to show her my heart. We dated for about 6 years till I popped the question, and we finally got married. I was over the moon when she was finally mine forever, and to ensure that she never leaves me, I tried everything I could to make her happy. Remembering the precious memories we made still makes me feel so good, and living with her didn't even make me realize when 12 years passed. It's not like I did not want a child, I do, just like any other man. I also wanted to have an offspring on my own, and wanted to see the motherly side of her. But even after trying everything we couldn't get pregnant, and her smile started to fade. It was still fine since we made peace with our fate. We couldn't continue to wait whenever our child is destined to come, and was planning on adopting a baby from an orphanage as our oldest. I liked that she was still being positive about all this. Right after making that decision, she miraculously conceived our child. I was so happy that I could fly, and judging by her reaction, she was feeling the same. So we started counting the days till the junior me or her came into this world. "What's you're watching, honey?" As I entered the room, I watched my glowing wife lying on the couch watching TV. It's a show called America's Got Talent. Now that I have started watching television, I realize I was missing out on so much. By the way, did you bring what I asked for? She said without turning to me, since there was a cute 6-year-old on the show performing a song. Ever since she got pregnant, she keeps watching and reading things that include kids. Of course, my lady, here are your blueberries. And I've also brought some pretzels, ice cream, sweet and sour candies. And for dinner, I would be cooking some steak for the 3 of us. I touched her tummy lightly as I said that, and the lovable look she gave me in return was worth it. "I love you. You're the best." She kissed me after saying that. My oh my, I was yearning for what comes after the kiss, but I was giving my all into controlling the lust I had for her because of her pregnancy. How can someone look exceptionally sexy with a baby bump? I want to devour you right now. As I said, she responded with a look of desire, but as we had promised each other not to do this until the baby is born, we avoided it. "I think we should focus on watching the show," she said with a smile, completely enjoying my turned-on state. "Nah, I think it would be better if I take a cold shower," I said while getting up from the couch, and she chuckled in response. "By the way, you sent the invitations for the gender reveal party, right?" I heard as I was about to enter the bedroom, so I told her loudly that I did. The party was held 2 days later, and all of our relatives came to attend. We were having so much fun with guessing games, friendly competitions, and receiving gifts that we didn't even realize that there was something among these laughing faces who was harboring some ill thoughts. After finally telling everyone that we were going to have a beautiful baby daughter, we received everyone's blessing. And as everyone was enjoying themselves, Aurora excused herself, saying she needed to use the restroom. And since I understood her bladder was out of control, I asked if she wanted me to stand guard like she does all the other time, but she told me to stay with guests to assist them. After about 20 minutes, I heard a loud thud along with my wife's groaning sound, so I hurried there, only to find her fallen at the end of the stairs. She tried to stand up on her own, but then I got her. She looked at the people who had gathered around her by now and tried saying, "Clah," but before she would say something, she looked down, and as I followed her gaze, I saw blood dripping between her leg. She fainted right after that, leaving me panicky. I picked her up and rushed her to my car, putting her on the seat. I carefully drove her to the emergency room. The relatives followed us to the hospital, and they all looked worried, but not more than me. I couldn't think of anything and prayed for my wife and child's safety while she was in the operating room. One of the doctors then called me and said that our child died in the womb since she fell on our baby. It was devastating. I wanted to scream and cry like hell had been loose, but I couldn't do that. I tried to regain my composure and asked if my wife was okay, and judging by the doctor's expression, she wasn't. The doctor told me that some issue had occurred in the fallopian tube, so she can never get pregnant again, and he wanted me to tell her this by myself. I was this close to breaking down, and Aurora was the only reason I was able to maintain my composure. So how was I going to do this to her? As I walked inside the room she was in, I was lying with an oxygen mask looking so weak. Her eyes met mine, and I immediately realized that she knew what was going on with her. She knew our baby had died. She didn't speak a word and just continued looking at me with a looking that was killing me from the inside. I never wanted her to go through something so painful ever in my life, and I never wanted her to have such an expression on her face. All I ever wanted was for her happiness to fill her life, not grief, not a scar like this that I can never help her heal. I didn't say anything either, and just went to sit beside her while holding her hand and rubbing it. There was nothing I could say that was going to ease the pain she was suffering, and knowing that it was the only thing I could do was crushing me inside. After a while, the relatives also rushed inside to see her condition. Nurses had already told them to stay silent since Aurora's mental condition could get worse if she hears something triggering, so they heeded their warning and stayed silent. I followed her gaze when I noticed her looking at someone with an expression that was pain, disappointment, betrayal, and so much more, to Claire, her cousin from mother's side. She said, smiling slightly, I knew I wasn't mistaken. I looked at Aurora, and this time she was looking at me, and I knew her eyes were saying, let it go. She stopped smiling, speaking, and her personality changed drastically. Watching her hurting was painful. But since I loved her, I was not going to let her suffer alone. Her grandfather came to visit her and told us that they were leaving all his assets to her name. He said he was going to do that after the party, but the unfortunate event prevented that. She didn't speak a word to him either before he left. I'm trying everything I can do to bring us out of this pain and to bring back the smile she lost that day. I have no idea how I'm going to do that and what I need to do, but I am determined to help her feel happy again. Our original plan was to adopt a child anyway, so we were going to apply for an adoption today. And if God showed us a miracle when we were about to lose all hope back then, who knows? In upcoming years, we may end up witnessing another miracle. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
This problem is still technically going on, but because of recent events, I think it'll be safe to share it here. To be brief, I purchased a high chair for an upcoming baby shower. The family member already had a similar chair, and I decided to keep it for future births. A year or more passed before I was notified of a recall of that specific item. Several children had been injured by it. I took it to the store I purchased it from just as the site instructed, to get a refund. The young man at the counter greeted me with a kind smile, and I informed him of the situation. The encounter got very weird after that. I'm not sure if he was trying to be funny, but the way he said it sounded very vindictive. We wouldn't want one of your little angels hanging himself, would we? It wasn't just what he said. He had a creepy smile as he said it. I became livid and demanded to talk to his manager. She soon came out of a back room and I explained exactly what had occurred. When confronted, he insisted it was just a joke. I'm unsure of what occurred after that. The manager relieved him and her and I completed the return. I'd go on with my life and things were normal for the next week. The young man had all but completely disappeared from my memory. The following weekend, I found myself shopping in the very same store. My son was riding in the basket seat just like he always did. I happened to run into an old friend from high school. I was very excited to see her. I briefly lost focus on my son. My back was turned for literally no more than a minute. The two of us were talking when she pointed behind me and asked if I knew the boy who was pushing my son up and down the aisle. This caused me to come unglued. I turned to see the very same young man pushing the cart holding my son back in my direction. As the cart approached, I screamed at the man to let go. My son, who had up until that moment been having a blast, saw my reaction and began crying. Much as before, the young man had a very casual reaction to the situation. He said something to the effect of, "Oh, calm down, lady. The kid's just having fun until you started freaking out. Now he's crying. It's no big deal. You should take a chill." A crowd had begun to assemble around us. Among the group was a store manager. He asked if he could help. I explained and demanded the police be called. We all returned to the office to discuss the incident. Somehow, he managed to convince me the cops weren't needed and assured me the young man was going to be terminated. It seemed like a just punishment. So, I agreed and left the store with no intention of ever returning. Now, we come to this past week. Since the terrifying interaction I had with the young man, I had been staying close to home. Briefly, I thought that he may try to get revenge on me for getting him fired, but a month had passed without any problems. Food was starting to run low. I made my way across town to another store I sometimes shopped at. This place was actually less expensive, but I disliked the quality of their products and avoided it. My shopping experience went off with no problems, and the cashier was very courteous. It was looking as if this place wasn't that bad after all. That wasn't until I was loading my groceries into my van. Everything was put away, and I turned to return the cart to a nearby corral. As I looked up, my eyes locked with those of a young man, the very same I've been having so much trouble with recently. It was like he'd appeared out of thin air. He had a smirk on his face and seemed to get a kick out of scaring me. He quietly chuckled before speaking. "Your psycho behavior caused me to lose my job, but I wasn't fired like you wanted. I've been there so long, they just let me quit. And now I'm working here. I was hoping I'd gotten away from you, but it looks like you have some crazy vendetta against me, lady. If you know what's good for you, you won't come back here." When he finished, he turned and walked back toward the store. In a panic, I just jumped in my car and locked the doors. I looked back and forth between the mirrors, half expecting him to just magically appear next to me. The tears came next. They lasted several minutes until I was able to regain my composure and drive away. I knew now that I had to do something. I decided to stop in at the police station to see if I could get a restraining order. An officer heard my story and told me in not so many words that I had no grounds. No matter what I said, I was unable to convince him. Eventually, he came up with an idea. He promised to talk to the young man about his behavior. It was far from what I wanted, but I was going to have to accept it. A few days passed and the officer called to let me know that they had spoken, and it had gone well. The boy agreed to stay away from me, and I assured the officer that I would do the same, and I thanked him and ended the call. As I'm writing this, the date is November 8th, a Monday. It's been 6 days since I last spoke to the young man. With little other choice, I've returned to shopping at the first store I spoke of. There's been no sign of trouble. I'm hoping the officer's talk put a little bit of fear of God into him. He sounded very confident in his assessment. I'm sure the police would know better about these things than I do. Yet there's a nagging little voice in the back of my mind, and something tells me I haven't seen the last of him.
What kind of ghost would haunt an Adam and Eve store? This is the story of the ghost that haunted the Adam and Eve store Probably he had his reasons. I never got the full story before, but when I took over the shop, I found out that the shop was haunted. They dropped it as casual as it could be. I was going to change the place and turn it into a McDonald's, but there was this issue with the previous haunting of what used to be an Adam and Eve store. There was just something about it that was stopping the customers from ever coming in, and I knew it could later have an effect on my business when I open up. So I decided to sit with the previous owner to make sure what happened in that place. The owner told me the story. It all started in 1800s. This store served as the brothel to the town, and young girls and women were out here selling themselves for the night, so the night would bring a lot of filth to the town. Now, in this town, everyone is quite liberated when it comes to sex, but it wasn't always the case. The brothel was despised by the local woman, and they even protested to get it removed. But certain men in power did not want that to happen because of the revenue they were getting, and more than that, because of the leverage that the ladies in brothel had over those sleazy men. The mayor of town Barrington wanted no part in the demolition of the brothel, and himself had a lot of times tried to save the brothel by providing it necessary funds from the bank. Some said that it was as a matter of fact run by the mayor himself, but they were all accusations. The mayor claimed when in question. He said in the town meeting, "The brothel brings in visitors to the town. That brings in new customers to the businesses. If you are ready to say goodbye to that, then I can propose the demolition of the brothel." And everyone in the town hall was quiet, and that was the end of the discussion for closing of brothel. There were churchgoers and God people who did not want any part in the town that would involve themselves in such sinful trade, and they decided to protest at the mayor's office and stood outside demanding mayor to close the brothel. But the mayor wasn't ready to do that, so in return, he decided to talk to one of the pastors in the church who took confessions and called him in for a meeting, and they sat down. And the mayor started, without stopping, told him everything and every reason why he can't destroy the brothel. He said, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned a lot. You see, Father, I have done something. The devil have a power over me. Around 2 years ago, when I had the bad fight with my wife, I came to the town and I saw a girl, Myuu. She was pretty. She was 17 at the time, and I was just smitten by the way she looked. She was like a sunshine that she calmed my anger. I decided to bet her father, and that night, that is what I did. I bed Myuu, and come morning, I realized what I had done, and I wanted nothing but to change what had happened. But in that guilt, there was the pleasure, and pleasure was winning. I was cheating on my wife with Myuu, but I still loved my wife. And then one day, Myuu tells me that I put a baby in her belly, and that just made me nervous. It was around the time when everyone wanted the brothel to shut down. In rage, I slapped Myuu, and she fell and hit her head on the corner of the bed, and I had no intention to do so, but that killed her. Now I wanted to come clean, but the ladies in the brothel said that they won't breathe a word to anyone if I let the brothel kept open. So they have the power over me, Father. I cannot let the brothel go away." And then the father slowly smiled and put his firm hand on the shoulders of Barrington and said, "Burn your sins, son, all of them. Once they are burnt, no accusations will be laid upon you." And then the very next day, the news broke out in the town. The brothel was lit on fire, and everyone inside of it died. No woman, no customer survived the fire, and everyone died. And then as the years passed, the property was passed from owners to owners, and everybody complained about the place being out of ordinary and disturbing. They even said that they witnessed a stray young girl walking around the halls. It wasn't until we opened an Adam and Eve store here that we saw it for the first time. Sex was symbolic to this store, and so the opening of our store called the apparitions to break loose and wreak havoc. That is why it is just third month and we have to close the shop. Hope McDonald's will bring in something better. They finished their story, and I realized that this place is not the right place for business, and I didn't even stay a week, and thank God I didn't. I would have lost more in that place. Now it is just an abandoned building. No Adam and Eve store, no McDonald's. Just an abandoned building for the ghosts to roam freely.
I've worked as a mall Santa for the past few Christmases now. I'm only 33, but thanks to my complete lack of exercise routine, I definitely have the figure for it. And once I have the beard and the wig and hat combo going, there's basically no telling the difference between me and a 60-year-old dude. Mall Santa work can be tough for a few different reasons. Number one, the hours are really long, and the pay can be really terrible depending on which model you manage to get employed by. Number two, the kids can be little monsters, and their parents can be just as terrible on occasion too. But the reason I'm actually considering skipping the entire thing this year and having something of a budget Christmas is that you get some seriously disturbing things happening from time to time. I mean, the kinds of things that keep you up at night, even after a long, exhausting shift. However, the worst thing that's ever happened to me as a mall Santa was actually nothing to do with kids. Parents are terrible, paying hours, and I'm sure you'll see why after I tell you the story. So every year, usually when the mall is required is during weekday mornings, we get specially organized visits from special needs kids or adults with learning disabilities who were bussed in from the surrounding areas. Pretty much every other mall Santa I've spoken to about this agrees that it can be one of the most rewarding parts of the job, and that the adults with learning difficulties are often even more excited about the prospect of meeting Santa. And some of the kids are literally the only downside is that some of them are so heavy that my thighs hurt after having like 50 in a row sit on my lap. But other than that, it's honestly one of the best parts of the job. Last year, I'm in the middle of one of the special sessions when I get this girl coming up and sitting on my lap. I say girl, but she was legitimately a grown woman looking like she was in her mid-30s or something. But she had a mental age of about 9 or 10. All smiles and giggles, way shy about meeting Santa again. It was cute as all get out. But the interaction was not so cute, and turned that way pretty fast. So, like I said, she's all giggles and smiles as she comes up to sit on my lap, and I give her the usual spiel asking her name, how old she is, if she's excited for Christmas, and all that stuff. Then when it comes to asking her what she wants me to bring her on Christmas Eve, she starts thinking about it, and smiling at first, before she suddenly gets super serious with a touch of sadness. I'm asking her if she's okay, what the problem is, and she's like shaking her head, acting like she doesn't want to tell me anything. I take the time and explaining that no matter what she asks for, I'll try my very, very best to bring it to her. No matter how big or small it is, that Santa always tries his best to bring good little girls and boys what they ask for on Christmas. She takes a moment. Then the exchange goes a little something like this. You mean it, Santa? He can get me anything I want for Christmas. Anything. Anything you want. Just tell me and I'll do my best. Okay. Well, at this point, she lowers her voice to a whisper and leans into my ear. I want my boyfriend to stop hitting me. Can you make that happen? Was sort of dumbstruck for a second. Like all of the things I thought she was going to ask, that would most definitely not have topped the list. I remember just nodding at first, trying to find the words and being like, go make that happen for you. Sure, no problem. She was so happy to hear that I'd fix it for her and gave me the biggest hug I think I'd ever received while working as a mall Santa. I had to put on a huge smile. And of all the times I've had to fake being jolly and merry, that time with her was the hardest. But I just felt numb, like completely broken by what I'd heard. And I just tried my best to get through the rest of the session without bursting into tears. I remember all these thoughts rushing through my head, terrifying ideas of institutional abuse. She said boyfriend, and that made it extra creepy. Like, sure, it could have been just another guy in her care group or something. Another adult with learning difficulties who she'd hooked up with somehow. But there was nothing to say that it wasn't a member of her care team that was like abusing her in a completely different sense. To not just physically, but, well, be catch my drift. So when the session was over, I approached the member of the care team that had organized the trip and accompanied them to the mall. I didn't let anything slip. I just told them how great I thought the session had gone, and that's have a few details about the group that had organized them. As it turned out, they were all from the same care home type thing. So I made a note of the name of the place as well as the name of the girl that it was apparently being abused. That night I couldn't sleep. I just kept picturing some evil monster abusing that poor girl, taking advantage of their position to put some poor special needs woman through torture, then telling her that she'd be killed if she ever breathed a word of it to anyone. And here's where stuff starts getting even more intense. Now, I could have just called 911. With the info I had at hand, registered a general complaint and then heard nothing back about it. A buddy of mine, had a cousin with the local police department, and not just some gumshoe B-cop either. They were a detective. It took some convincing, but I convinced my buddy to pass along their cell phone number so I could get in touch with the dude personally. It took a while, but I managed to get through to the guy who sounded pretty skeptical at first and seemed kind of irritated that his cousin had given me this number. But once I explained what the issue was, his tone changed completely. Now, I didn't find this out until way later from my friend, but his cousin had a special needs daughter who was probably going to have to either live with them for the rest of their life or was going to head into a group home at some point so she could have some measure of independence. So when I explained the situation with the special needs girl I met as a mall Santa, it obviously hit the guy right in the feels as the topic was so close to home. The detective tells me that he'll look into it. Thanks for letting him know. I get him to promise to tell me if anything comes up, and he says yes, and we hang up. And that was the last I heard of it for like a month. Then, maybe 5 or 6 weeks, I'd almost forgotten about the whole thing. Christmas was over the mall. Santa's job was way behind me, and I was back to working my regular hours as a self-employed mechanic. Then I get a call from a number that seems vaguely familiar, although I wasn't quite sure why. Turns out, it was my buddy's detective cousin, who reminded me of the tip that I'd given him about the care company. Of course I remembered, but by that time I really didn't think anything would come of it. But oh, how wrong I was. The detective thanks me for the information, and although he told me he couldn't say too much, he told me to keep an eye out on local media outlets. The next thing I know, it's all over the local papers that there have been a misconduct scandal involving a local care company. I picked up a copy and read the story, only to find out that it's the very same one I had reported. The long and short of it is that the cops had uncovered endemic levels of abuse in the company, stuff that varied from financial discrepancies to straight-up physical abuse. And sickeningly enough, there was even cases of care workers taking advantage of mentally disabled females in ways that were seriously inappropriate. There were numerous arrests, with some of the sleazier and violent criminals looking like they were going to get years in prison for how long they so cruelly taken advantage of some of the most vulnerable people in society. It made me sick to my stomach to read about how some people could bring themselves to do something like that. But it was stopped, and I felt incredible that I'd actually managed to be a part of the chain of events that brought the whole thing crashing down. I just hope that that poor girl, who was obviously pretty traumatized by what was happening to her and just not being able to understand why it was happening, either found some measure of peace after it. And in a way, Santa did kind of bring her exactly what she wanted, even if it wasn't on Christmas Day. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a thought that never fails to make me tear up.